Ready when you are, Madam Chair.
Okay. Good, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our planning and development meeting. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, no public meetings, we have a delegation. Please be advised, in accordance with the Council's procedural bylaw, no decision will be made today on this delegation. The committee will do one of the following: refer the matter to staff for a report, refer the matter to future budget deliberations, or take no action. I'd like to welcome Ian Andres, Goodmans LLP, petition for drainage works, Anderson Line and Upper Big Chute Road. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. As you've noted, my name is Ian Andres. I'm a municipal lawyer with Goodmans in Toronto. So I'm appearing this morning on behalf of our client, a numbered company, 374220 Ontario Limited, which is the owner of an 8.7 hectare parcel of vacant land abutting an old rail corridor just south of Upper Big Chute Road with frontage on River Street and Anderson Line. And my client is a co-petitioner with Ms. Maria Squire, who's the owner of an adjacent 13.6 hectare vacant parcel, which abuts the south limit of Upper Big Chute Road. So the purpose of me appearing this morning is to speak to the petition we have filed under Section 4 of the Drainage Act, which is item G.5 on your agenda, and the subject of Public Works Report W23046. Together, the petitioner's lands comprise approximately 69% of the area identified as requiring drainage, which meets the threshold set in the Act for a valid petition.
Speaking.
I'll come back to that. In simple terms, the purpose of this petition is to establish an appropriate outlet for the stormwater which collects and floods on the subject lands. And as you may or may not know, at common law, landowners who do not have riparian rights, which means they do not have direct access to a natural water course, are not permitted to collect and discharge water onto adjacent lands. So by establishing an engineered municipal drain, this water can actually be legally conveyed to a natural water course. In this case, it's presumably the Coldwater River. And the cost of any infrastructure created to meet that objective would be assessed and collected from the benefiting owners. I did actually submit a presentation. I don't know if it's possible to put that on the screen.
You're welcome to share your screen, or if you'd like me to, I can do that fairly quickly.
Sure. Actually, if you wouldn't mind, that would be wonderful.
One moment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, give me one moment here. My computer's cooperating. Okay. There's screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, thank you. So if you could just please go to the second slide. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. So I've just included a series of visual images here to help explain what I'm talking about. So first we have some historic air photos, and I've included these to depict the subject properties and how they've changed over the years, and also to demonstrate that the drainage problem did not always exist. So you can see from the earlier photos from 1954, 1978, the lands used to be farmed. However, over time, the farming activity ceased and the flooding issues became more regular, which ultimately has contributed to some overgrowth, as you see in the more recent photos on the bottom of the screen, including the Google aerial image from today. Next slide, please. We have concluded that at least one of the primary causes, if not the main cause of the flooding on these lands, is the inadequate conveyance channels on the south edge of the county road allowance. There are ditches on Upper Big Chute Road, and there's culverts passing underneath, but unfortunately they do not function properly through a combination of the grading not working well and the culverts actually becoming clogged with mud and debris and not allowing water to pass through. And so as a result of that, the water instead migrates south across Ms. Squire's property and onto my client's property, causing flooding issues, particularly in the spring months, as you can see in the lower photo there. We have attempted to engage county staff on this issue, and they were kind enough to meet us on site with our engineers. I wasn't there myself, but my client and the engineers were there back in July. And the county's initial response was essentially that it wasn't their problem because they don't need to fix ditches or culverts to assist a private landowner. And that may be true, but with respect to the county, that kind of misses the point, because just as private landowners are not entitled to discharge water onto adjacent lands, the county isn't really allowed to do that either. So in theory, one way we could attempt to address that would be to prevent that water from coming on the lands by building a berm or some other obstruction, which would have the effect of the water pooling within the road allowance. But that's obviously not in anyone's interest to do that. And we're not here to pick a fight or try to exacerbate the existing problem. We're trying to find a solution. So at the conclusion of the meeting and through some subsequent correspondence, the county did ultimately encourage us to pursue this municipal drain petition as an appropriate means of resolving the issue. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So while this flooding is an ongoing problem that requires a solution, as I just showed in the photo, one reason it's in the public interest in my submission to find a solution is that these lands are earmarked for growth. They're within the settlement area boundary. They've been designated settlement living area within the county and township official plans for some time. I've got the land use maps from the township official plans up there. And you can see on the left-hand side of the page, the 2010 consolidation of the township OP designates the lands as settlement living area. I've just circled it. Yes, that's right. And then on the other side of the page, the adopted township official plan has them in yellow color, still settlement living area. My client's lands are actually within the urban service area, right next to the diagonal rail corridor, whereas the adjacent lands owned by Ms. Squire are designated growth area 2. So in both cases, earmarked for growth, my client's lands are probably an even higher priority given that they're within the urban service area. And my client has engaged with township staff on pre-application consultation a couple of years ago now to discuss a forthcoming rezoning and subdivision application. So that is still in the works. And while the draft plan and the lotting patterns are still being considered, we anticipate that the lands will accommodate over 100 residential units just on my client's site. And that will be through a combination of single detached houses and townhouses, depending on the desired levels of density. Ms. Squire's lands adjacent, which are designated growth area 2, could easily accommodate an additional 100 or 200 units. So these lands represent the next logical community to be built in Coldwater. And that's why we're respectfully requesting the township's assistance to help us address this drainage issue so that my client can proceed with its applications. So go to the last slide, please. So we've been working with Tatham Engineering on this issue and in preparation of application materials. And Tatham prepared this sketch for us to support the petition. And it depicts what we believe is the area requiring drainage. So that's a fairly large area outlined in heavy black lines. The horizontal hatching shows my client's lands, the numbered company, up against the rail corridor, and then the other hatching, the vertical and horizontal hatching together, shows Ms. Squire's property, and that's labeled as Area 2. So I have read the staff report. I also spoke with Mr. Burke, and he was quite helpful when we spoke a week or two ago. And I note that his report indicates that drainage petitions of this nature are not typically used to facilitate development applications, but he goes on to say it's nevertheless worth exploring. Mr. Burke did mention this to me when we spoke as well, and he noted that other municipal drains existing in Severn have typically been used for agricultural purposes. So be that as it may, the reality is these lands do have a serious flooding problem. And whether the municipal drain is used to accommodate a residential subdivision development or farming uses, it's still a drainage solution that's required here. And I can personally advise that I've experienced using drainage petitions on 2 separate occasions to establish legal outlets for new residential subdivisions, both of which were in Kitchener. And on both occasions, our client went through this exact process, filing a Municipal Drainage Act petition under Section 4 to ultimately ensure that the stormwater that's collected on the development lands could be conveyed to a nearby watercourse over intervening public and private lands. In those cases, there were roads intervening as well as other private lands. And the process worked well there, and there's no reason it wouldn't work here too. And the way the process is set up, as you probably know, the township would appoint a drainage engineer to convene an on-site meeting and to do the necessary study and analysis, to meet with all stakeholders and provide the proper notices, and ultimately to prepare a report. And that report would set out what the assessed benefits would be from the drain and who should pay for them. And the landowners who signed the petition, my client and Ms. Squire, understand that by doing so, they're accepting that there would be a financial burden associated with this, but ultimately it's something that is a solution that needs to be shared and cost shared amongst the benefiting owners. And by having the municipality involved, it allows for the property rights to be available, essentially, so that the water can be taken to the legal outlet, to the river, as appropriate. So that's really all I wanted to say today. I think Mr. Burke's report is also quite helpful, and I'm sure you've read that already. And I just wanted to thank you for considering this matter. I'm happy to take any questions you may have, but we hope that the township sees fit to move forward, and we look forward to working with the township on this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andres. Anybody on the committee have any questions or comments for Mr. Andres? Okay, seeing none.
Very much.
Thank you. We will move on to.
Oh, Madam Chair, I just have a motion.
Oh yeah, we have to do a motion. Sorry. Yes.
That's all right. So the motion just reads that the delegation by Mr. Andres regarding a petition for drainage work at Anderson Line and Upper Big Chute Road be received for information.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Member Taylor, second by Member Brennan. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, consent agenda E. Any items to be pulled and discussed later? Member Taylor.
Yes, Madam Chair, E 2.2, please.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes.
Member Brennan?
Yes, thank you. E 1.2, please.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So motion to adopt the agenda will read that the agenda be adopted, including consent items with the exception of items numbered E 2.1 and E 2.2.
May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Member Jansen, second by Member Burkett. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, reports from officials for directions. G.1, administration report, housekeeping amendment, general admit, animal control bylaw. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Pretty straightforward update. We're just looking to address animals running at large. We have had instances over the summer where we've had chickens and donkeys out on the road, and we just need the ability to apply for a set fine related to the lack of control of animals coming from some of these properties. And so we're looking to add literally one section to the bylaw.
Okay. Questions, anyone? Member Brennan.
Thank you. Through the chair to Allison. I'm just wondering about, do we have mechanisms in place for cost recovery for these things?
Yes.
I was just this weekend. You might have seen that there's a bunch of llamas running loose somewhere in Simcoe County. I can't even imagine what it would cost to try to trap and get that under control.
Yeah, so we have a livestock. We do have, through you, Madam Chair, we do have a livestock pound keeper. So if it's something that normally we try and get the property owner, the animal owner first to go out and corral their own animals. And then because of them running at large and not providing adequate shelter and such, then fines are laid. But failing that, we do have a livestock pound keeper that can come and take the animals and shelter them appropriately. And if so, then they're charged back a fee on a daily basis until the animals are picked up.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one through to Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, if an animal escapes through a fence or breaks through and the owners get them, that's not an issue. These are like dogs and things running at large. Because if an animal breaks through a fence or jumps a fence, it's really not that they haven't looked after it. It's the fact that they have an animal who kind of escapes.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, there's a clear difference between an animal breaking loose and not providing any fencing or control over the animals at all. Okay. We have a couple properties where they were just let to run loose all over the front yard and made their way out. And similar to on a couple other properties. So the goal here is just in the event that there's nothing in place to try and corral the animals, as would be normal agricultural practice, then there's no care and or custody control being exerted over the animals. If a horse jumps a fence line, that's a little different.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for the public. Okay, no other questions or comments? I'm moving a seconder. Oh, Madam Clerk, I guess you need to read it first.
The motion reads that Administration Report number A23-046 dated November 22nd, 2023 regarding a housekeeping amendment general animal control bylaw be received, and that the proposed amendment be approved, and further that the required bylaw be brought forward to the next council meeting.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member Jansen, second by Member Brennan. All in favor? Thank you very much.
I have no video.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. Now we'll move on to Madam Clerk for housekeeping amendment fence bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the township has a fairly comprehensive fence bylaw that's been in place since 2010. It sets out different standards for residential versus agricultural and commercial and industrial. Within the residential, though, we would like to add a new section dealing with townhouse fencing. The intent is to require gates between lots when they put fences along the backside of new townhouses. This is not to facilitate neighbor access. If that is to be done, then that would be covered through a planning application. This is to ensure emergency access for fire and any other emergency responders should they need to access the backside of a property. So,
any questions or comments? Member Brennan? I think he's frozen. Okay, never mind.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's just that you had your yes up. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I actually had a yellow card up this time, but keep going back to yes.
Do you have a question? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I do. Through the chair to Allison. I guess maybe I needed to read that thing more than once. I have no concerns at all with the bylaw. What I don't understand is when you have townhouses, because a lot of them are built back to back. So on either side of you, you have a neighbor and you have neighbors behind you. Where does the gate go?
It would go sort of, if you have your lot that's like this, it goes on the side.
On the side?
It doesn't go on the back, it goes on the side.
To one of the neighbors' properties?
Yeah.
And okay, so if you have a gate on your property that goes, let's say to your right as you're facing the back of your lot, and your neighbor on the other side has one on the left, then I just don't understand how it works. Yeah. Like, how would anybody be able to access that scenario? It just seems to me, I just don't understand it. That's all. You must have it figured out, but I haven't.
I'm bear in mind with my really rudimentary map. So I don't know if you can see that. Oh, it doesn't come out very well with my.
No.
I'm trying. So you basically you have the townhouses, the townhouse row, right? And then so say if everyone were to fence their property in behind, and you wouldn't put the gate on the, I'm going to say center back. You would put it on the left side and the right side fencing. So you'd have access along the rear side of all the properties.
So you need to put in 2 gates.
You'd have to put 2 gates in.
Okay. And everyone would have to do that. Oh, that's really
well. Anybody who wants a fence would have to do that.
And what have you got against the neighbor on the back that you can't have a gate?
It would be off the property, right? So this would be fencing still on their own property.
No, but you have 3 property lines in that scenario, right? The back of your property, and presumably, I know the line fences doesn't apply, but presumably all you would be nice and everybody pay their fair share. Okay, anyway, yeah, no, I just find it a little, I've never seen it before in a townhouse scenario, and I've seen lots of townhouses, so I'm just trying to figure out how it would work. And this gate is wide enough.
One gate on the back of each side.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Member Jansen, did you have a question?
Yes, hi, through the chair. I'm just wondering how practical it is. I've lived in townhouses before in a couple of different locations with fencing that did not have any gate there. I guess what's to stop a homeowner from putting a lock on the gate if they don't like their neighbor, and then the fire doesn't have access anyway?
I mean, fire does have the ability to cut any bolt that's on there if they really need access. So if they needed to gain access, that's a simple pair of bolt cutters and through they go without having to wreck someone's fence to get through.
Okay, and just supplemental.
This is not intended to facilitate neighbor to neighbor access. This is purely for emergency services.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and is this something that's being done in other municipalities? Like they're putting in a bylaw for emergency services like this?
I genuinely do not know. This came out of a discussion with staff and reviewing a couple upcoming developments within Severn, where there is no general. In a lot of townhouses, what you get is a general access easement that is across the back of townhouse strips. It is meant to facilitate neighborly access, so you can get in to mow your lawn and that type of stuff. Okay. In this case, we have a couple where those easements won't be in place. So we were working to find a route that would at least ensure that emergency services had access through rear yards.
Okay.
Member Mings, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. My question is the same as Member Jansen's about whether or not this is something that the province is adopting more widely through municipalities, or this is something that Severn's brought forward. I'm not satisfied with the response, having this come from a staff conversation. I'm not sure why we would put this policy in place if there isn't a problem that we're trying to solve. And unless, I would like to see perhaps the experts like the firefighters weigh in on whether or not this has prevented them from successfully battling fires in townhouse complexes in the past, before we put something forward saying that we require homeowners to have 2 side gates on any fencing in a townhouse development.
Ms. Woodrow, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I might just give a bit of background and hopefully it helps. In other municipalities, there are rear yard access easements put into place for townhouses. So essentially, you don't have to take your lawnmower through the house if you're an internal unit. So in terms of the rear yard access easement for lawnmowers, you could incorporate a gate at the same time. So that's where that came from.
Supplemental?
Thank you, supplemental through the chair. So help me to understand that, Ms. Woodrow, around the example or the comparison you gave to lawnmowers, because in your example, I'm trying to visualize a neighbor going through their next door neighbor's property yard to get their lawnmower into their backyard. So what you're saying, this is not just for firefighting, this is for any kind of access to rear yards and townhomes?
If I may, Madam Chair, in response to Councillor Minning's question. So I think essentially that's where it initiated from. There are other municipalities who've encountered complaints from homeowners in internal townhouse units where they have to have a lawnmower for the front yard and a lawnmower for the backyard, for example. So they don't have to take a lawnmower through the house. So the easements can come into play to allow that access from a break in townhouse blocks through to the rear yard. And at that point in time, gates would be required for the easements. So then it could also facilitate gates for emergency access at the same time.
So then supplemental, in your clarification, if there's a strip of townhomes and I have to mow my rear yard, I can start at the open gate at the end townhome and open all the gates in the rear yards of everybody to drag my lawnmower through there to mow my lawn and then reverse it back out. And that would be the same for not just lawnmowers, for firefighters, for any kind of access without permission. I'm trying really hard to understand why you're bringing this forward as a blanket solution.
So if I may, Madam Chair, through you
Yes.
to Councillor Minnings, the lawnmower access easements are starting to stray a little bit. I just kind of wanted to give a background as to where this came from, but the rear yard access easements would be something that would be disclosed at time of purchase of the unit. They're registered on title, so you would be aware that it would be on your unit when you purchased it. So not all units may have the ability to have an easement. So that is why they are incorporating one potentially for emergency services access in this particular case.
Okay. I think I'll go to Madam CAO and then to Member Burkett and then to Member Brennan. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to, through the chair, I just wanted to circle back to the emergency access piece. So the chief unfortunately is unavailable today, but that was part of his interest, is to find an easier way to the backyard for firefighting. You may have seen on the news, I think it was last week, that a whole bunch of townhouses in Vaughan went up. So it's just a proactive way for us to provide better emergency services. And it did come through the fire department.
Okay. Member Burkett. Thank you, Madam CEO.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Exactly what I was going to say. We now, for members of council, are faced with townhouses that are being built within our municipality. And I think staff are trying to be proactive because it's new to us, coming up with some sort of solution. And Ms. Woodrow can correct me if I'm wrong. And we can always come back. If this doesn't work, we can change the bylaw, but we need something in place based on what's happening within our township. And I think that's what they were trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Member Burkett. Member Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Andrea. So why can't, I mean, a lot of these buildings are built with a high density now. Most individual buildings will have a little walkway where you can bring your lawnmower or God knows what. Hell, people put in pools for Pete's sake there. I just don't understand, if you're going to go to townhouses, why we can't demand that an easement be put at the back, like where they're back-to-back townhouses. I don't understand why we would allow that design in the first place if it's a hazard to public health. Why can't we just say, you want to build a townhouse, you leave an easement? I don't understand. That just seems to me to be a logical way of doing it.
Okay. Ms. Woodrow, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Brennan. So as Mayor Burkett noted, townhouses are new for Severn. We have a few historical developments, but they're becoming more and more popular as an alternative form of affordable housing, basically. And that is why we are demanding easements. To put it lightly, we're requiring them as part of new townhouse developments for all new proposals in Coldwater right now, in West Shore as well. And there may be the opportunity to incorporate the gate for emergency service access as part of the easement where appropriate. If there is no chance for a rear yard access easement, which is going to be rare moving forward, but if there weren't an opportunity, the change to the fence bylaw would still allow a gate.
Thank you.
And is it true that anyone could use that gate, or just emergency services? That's trespassing.
Yeah.
I don't
Madam
get,
Clerk.
I wouldn't want anybody getting on my property.
I think I'm going to let Madam Clerk speak to this again. Thank you.
Thank you. So the proposal we're making, because there is, from what I understand, the one development review meeting I sat in on, there is actually one proposed site plan or townhouse development proposed where there will not be a rear yard access easement. At least that was the last version that I looked at with the department, which is what generated this. So this proposal is purely for emergency services access. It is not to facilitate neighbors crossing neighbors' properties. It is not to facilitate that other piece. That said, I personally know quite a few people, including my mother, who, when they lived in townhouse complexes, that there was an easement across the back where these were in place. And it is a requirement of that easement that if people put fences in, and that there is a gate installed that is available for your neighbors to walk across the back of your property. They're not allowed to walk all over your property. They have to stick within the easement lands. But what we're looking at today is for the instances where there is no easement and people want to put a fence in on the backside of their townhouses. So there's no guaranteed right of access through an easement. And we still want emergency response to be able to go in through the backyard of a fence yard if they choose to fence their yard. People aren't required to put fences in. So this is just if they choose to put a fence in on their townhouse lot and there's no rear yard easement, then they would be required to ensure that there's gates.
Thank you. Member McIntyre.
Through the chair, let me, I guess you have to do that. Through the chair, in my experience with the real estate for over 4 decades, I've never seen back-to-back fencing anywhere. Is there any proposal that we're going to do back-to-back fencing in any of the townhouse complexes that we've approved? I mean, back-to-back, without a space in the middle, without an easement in the middle. Is that happening in what's going on in our townhouse developments at the moment?
Ms. Woodrow or Madam CAO? Oh, Ms. Mandeville, I don't know. You two decide. Thank you, Ms. Woodrow.
Madam Chair, I just had a quick clarification for Councillor McIntyre. So when you say back-to-back townhouses, is that like where they're constructed back-to-back?
Through the chair, fence to fence. Is there no gap? If you've got a townhouse complex here and one over here, I've never seen where there's no gap between the two townhouse complex. What we're saying here is, I think what we're trying to define here is, are we back to back, fence to fence?
I appreciate where you're going, Member McIntyre. So you're thinking so you have the buildings and there's the gap, the lawn, I'm going to say the lawn stretch between the two buildings.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is the actual, what would be your backyard. So not that side piece, the backyards.
I understand, through the chair, I understand that, Madam Clerk, but I'm thinking, do we have anything proposed in terms of a townhouse complex in our township where the fences will be back to back? If a townhouse complex is on road Elm Street and one is on Oak Street, and it's all the same townhouse complex, are the fences going to be back to back where there's no gap in between Oak Street and Elm Street? I've never seen, in 40 some years, without a gap in the middle. I've never seen fences back to back in a townhouse. Hence, this is why you've got side through side through side. I'm suggesting that if we have that, I'm in favor of the bylaw. If we don't have that, what are we doing with this? You can access through a gate in the back. It goes into the green space. It's in between the two complexes. I think I'm trying to be as clear as I can. I just don't understand, if we don't have back-to-back, like fence to fence, and it's not proposed at the moment anywhere in our township, I don't know what we're doing with the bylaw.
Can I make a comment? I would like to say that I am very sure that our fire chief would not have brought this forward if he didn't believe that there was a liability on behalf of the township, that if we can't get in to put out a fire, then we would be at risk. And I'm just saying, because it came from the fire chief, who couldn't be here today, that he obviously has a concern. But anyway, Member Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair to planning. So further to Member McIntyre, with the new townhouses going in and a middle unit, say there's four units and I'm at unit 2, how does unit 2 get access to their backyard without having to cross their neighbors? Like how does that contemplated in our new development going as is happening now in Coldwater and West Shore? Like how do you get your lawnmower in your backyard without having to go through your living room?
Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Taylor. So for the townhouses in Coldwater, we have required the rear yard access easements so that the internal units would have access through the external units' rear yards to take matters or items such as their lawnmowers or a new shed that they've bought that they want to construct, that sort of thing. in the Turnbull townhouses, some of the units have a garage door. I guess it's an internal garage door, like a person door from inside the garage to the rear yard. But because of grades and such, that's not always possible. So that's a building design solution. So there's an easement solution and a building design solution. So one or the other, or sometimes a combination of both.
So just to follow up through the chair, so all instances are contemplated that there will be means for the prospective owner to get into their backyard. Is that what you're saying, Andrea?
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to confirm that for Councillor Taylor, yes, but I think Madam CAO also had a point she wanted to raise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if council has concerns, if you want to defer this until the fire chief is available, and we could draw some pictures so that you could see what it is we're actually talking about, because it is hard to visualize.
Member Minnings.
Yes, 100%. That's why I had my sign up earlier. We don't have the right people at the table right now to satisfy my questions on this important issue around fire.
Madam Clerk.
I am just trying to get the fire chief to join our meeting now. So maybe what we could do is just put this over for even go on to the next item. And if he can get into the meeting, then he can address your comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay. Let's go on to G4. No, it isn't. I'm sorry. G3, the canine control, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are looking to do some amendments to our canine bylaw. This is a bit more of a substantive amendment than the last two reports. We currently do not have, even though we have the Dangerous Dog Liability Act to pull from, and we have, we are looking to add protective custody and dangerous dog provisions into our bylaw. We have had a couple issues this summer in particular where we have struggled to figure out a path forward with our shelter because certain provisions were not in the bylaw to allow for us to take a dog immediately if, you know, there's hot weather conditions, there's an accident, there's a serious dog bite where we need to have it immediately housed until we can arrange for a long-term shelter. And provisions where we can have a dog declared a dangerous dog and have additional requirements for how that dog, if it is returned to the owner, is handled going forward, such as muzzling, requirements for spay and neuter, fencing requirements, security requirements, that type of stuff. So this is a amendment that has come out of the result of some very real scenarios that we've been through in the last 4 months, and is supported by both our pound keeper and our canine contractor. So if there's any questions.
Okay, any questions, comments? Okay, Member Winnings.
Sorry, just unmuting in all areas. My question is specific to the definition you've provided of dangerous dog, specific to lunges at or pursues any person or vehicle. That definition on page 81 of the package of the proposed recommendations does not, it's not in other dangerous dog definitions that I've researched that are widely accepted in Ontario through various canine sources. So I just want you to speak to B, lunges at or pursues any person or vehicle. Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I think it's important to remember two things. One, when we talk about dangerous dogs, one, it has to be reported. And two, I sorry, I don't know what bylaws Member Minnings has referenced, but the bylaws we referenced were from Markham, Vaughan, Innisfil, and a couple other larger municipalities, and these were exactly consistent with their definitions as well. They're supported by the SPCA and the PAWS Act as to how legislation has been interpreted for dangerous dogs. I don't know the age of the other bylaws that Member Minnings was looking at, and I'm happy to discuss that with her further if she'd like. The idea of lunges is not, we're not talking about a puppy that just gets away from its owner. We're talking, and again, you have to remember when we're dealing with bylaw enforcement that there's a degree of officer's discretion in the application of every regulatory bylaw that we have. So when we talk about lunges, we're talking about a dog that ran out the front door of a house and went after someone. We're not talking about the dog that just got out to go greet someone in the driveway that's known them for 10 years. We're talking about the dog that's gone across the street that's likely bit someone and caused damage, like broken skin. We don't use the term dangerous dog lightly. It has a very serious connotation to it and has a very high liability to it for the property owner once that designation is imposed. So it is not something we take lightly, but we have seen an increase in dog bites in the last year. And we need some tools to be able to effectively deal with that outside of having the dog officially designated under the DOLA Act, the Dangerous Dog Liability Act, that actually stays with the dog across every municipality once that designation is on. It's registered against the dog and it transfers with them across municipalities if they were to move. So if this was a one-off incident and the owner then undertakes the necessary controls and practices, then we have a way then of addressing the dog and the behavior without having to have that dog registered as a dangerous dog throughout the entire province of Ontario. It gives us more tools in the toolbox, so to speak. And again, whether or not we were to pursue the dangerous dog sessions under here, outside of DOLA, in the instance that we had about 2 months ago, we would probably actually apply both because we've had some bad incidences. If it was just a one-off first time, we might give someone the warning to say, we're going to designate your dog maybe a dangerous dog under the bylaw, but we're not going to go to the extent of DOLA, which involves a court proceeding. So like I said, it gives us more tools in the toolbox to be able to apply depending on the scale of the incident that happens.
Member Minnings, is that okay?
So I thank you. And subsequent to that explanation, I'm wondering if you couldn't add some language around there, because on its own, this definition, when you look at it, does actually speak to the things that you said it wasn't intended to, like some little dog running out the door, you know, when the doorbell rings and there's somebody standing on the, you know, outside. So that's where my mind went, that there's no parameters that speak to the dangerous situation of a dog lunging or pursuing a person or a vehicle. That's all I'm saying.
And if I can, Madam Chair, in response to Member Minnings, I think there's two things here. One, we have to remember that we already have a definition in the bylaw for dogs running at large and provisions for that. So dogs are not allowed to run at large at all, period. They're not allowed to be off leash. So if your dog is in your front yard, it's required already to be under your care and control. So we're dealing with, in this situation, we're dealing with something above and beyond that. I think it's also important to remember that when our staff respond to an incident that would be triggered to bring about this clause, it's typically been reported as a full dog bite or someone's been attacked, which is very different than your dog generally running at large. And our officers are trained thoroughly, and our contract staff, to know the difference between A and B. So I think some of this is recognizing that there is the pre-existing portions of the bylaw that already deal with, when I say your regular day-to-day dogs running at large, and these are the other circumstances.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes.
Subsequent, just to wrap that up, thank you. I've never seen this before in my almost year here on council, and I'm not aware of the officer that we have. When you talk about the person that would be called in such a dangerous incident, it's not the bylaw officer, it's someone else. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, we have specialized trained canine contract staff that would be responding in these incidences.
Okay, Member Brennan.
Thank you. Through the chair to Allison. Just a comment here. I didn't even think about this. I have no problem with this particular bylaw, but just its existence to me raises the whole question of those gates again. So if anyone can get through a gate and I've got my bulldog secured in my yard, what happens? Who is liable there? You know, like it just raises an issue. Access to a pool is also, although pools are unlikely in townhouses. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not true. But anyway, it's just those things that are haunting me around this issue. Thank you.
And we can come back to that. The fire chief has now joined us. So once we're done this, we can go back.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I personally have no problem with the lunges because I've had that happen. And when it's in a dangerous thing, the word lunge to me means something more attack of than hops up and down. So I understand. And the part about the vehicle, that happens many times with people on bicycles. I know that they have had issues with it. And I also know that if a woman who was in a wheelchair went by and a dog did that. So I understand completely. And I think it's in the context of it that it sounds like it would be dangerous. So anyway, Madam Clerk, do you have a motion for us?
I do. So the motion reads that administration report number 823-045 dated November 22nd, 2023 regarding housekeeping amendment canine control bylaw be received and the proposed amendments be approved, and further that the new dangerous dog licensing fee be approved, and further that the required bylaw be brought forward to the next council meeting.
I need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member Burkett, seconded by Member Jansen. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Do you want to go back to the other one, Madam Clerk?
Yeah, I believe the fire chief has joined us now. So. There he is.
Good morning.
Hello, Chief. How are you?
Not bad. How are you?
We're having a discussion on the, as you've been told probably by Madam Clerk. So we would just like your take on the rationale for the gates on the townhouses, please. We're having some issues here with people understanding it and making sure that it's you that have called this forward. Thank you.
Yes. So when we were looking at this townhouse issue and fencing around the townhouses, we're looking at it from an emergency service access point of view. So with these townhouses, they're limited access through the fronts of the buildings and through the building into the backyard. And so when we have either medical emergencies or backyard fire, back deck fire, we have limited access to those backyards. So by putting these access gates in, gives us better access to those backyards, easier access to the backyards without having to deal with going through the entire structure.
Oh yeah, I never thought of the paramedic either. Yeah, thank you. Any questions for the chief? Member Taylor.
Yeah, so that you just triggered something there. So if I have a middle townhouse and I want to put a deck behind my townhouse, then how does that work with the gate? Maybe that's a planning question. So what happens there? Like it's now you're limiting my backyard for this access gates on both sides.
I think it's only if there's a fence.
Yeah, but if
there was no gate, you would not be able to at all. Sorry. Anyway, someone would like to answer that, please.
Go ahead, Chief.
I can, through the chair, I can try and give that a bit of a. So even if there is a deck, there's still enough room at the back there within the yard, on most areas to have a fence and a gate in there. It'd be, I'm not sure how big a deck you were referring to, but there should still be enough room to do whatever in the backyard, plus put a deck in there.
Okay. I think you're just in wrapping up. I think I saw Andrea had her sign up there. Maybe she had a planning answer to my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Councillor Taylor. So certainly a deck would be restricted by provisions such as setbacks and lot coverage and that sort of thing. So it wouldn't be taking up the entire rear yard. So the gates would be situated such that there wouldn't be a conflict with a deck.
Okay. Okay, I think I have Member Minnings.
Thank you, through the chair to the chief. With emergency access, in the event of a fire or a response from your department, can you help me understand how, if there was a fire and the fire department needed to gain rear access to the fire and would go through the side yards, how you would get your equipment and your hoses through there and not go through the structure actually? So I'm just trying to understand how there's a fire in the townhome. It's a center townhome. There's no access anywhere else currently except through the front door, perhaps the garage. How those fires are being fought and what problem you're solving and how you would be able to actually access that.
Go ahead,
through the chair to member meetings. So that's why we're asking for these access gates. So we would have to surround the structure and come at it from the backside to mitigate the fire if it was in the backyard. That is our only option for these center units, is to go around the entire building and come back at it. That's why we're asking for these gates, is to give us the access to the backyard to help us assist. So we would have to run hoses around the building to the back and then through these gates into to the back rear of the structure.
Madam, I'm just gonna let Miss Woodrow speak to this too, so we get them all at once. Sorry, you're muted.
Ms. Woodrow. My apologies. If it's okay, Madam Chair, we would like to share a visual to visually depict what the chief has just explained.
Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you. Can you just kind of zoom that in a bit? Is it Katie who's sharing? Sorry, or is it Madam Clerk?
I believe this is Miss Mandeville.
Okay, thank you. There, can everyone see that?
Madam Chair, maybe just for a bit of context, if I may.
Yes, thank you.
So to the top of the page would be the road and the driveways and the front of the townhouses in this area.
Yep.
And then where the numbers are 89, 91, 93, 95, 97, those are the actual units themselves.
Okay.
And then below that, in the area of the brown lines there, would be a depiction of potential fencing that landowners would be eligible to install.
Okay.
And then the yellow is the access easement leading you from the front of the dwelling. So if you bring your lawnmower from your garage and you follow the yellow line out and down the side between the blocks of townhouses to the rear yard, the blue dots would depict potential gates within the fences for each unit.
Yeah, okay. And the blue dot over here at the end would be the one that could go in from this way by the green circle.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Member Minnings.
So thank you for the image. And my subsequent question to the chief is, here in this diagram, the first 4 lots with the blue dots look like there is actually a rear yard easement on the other side of the homeowner's fence. So nobody would be going through someone's property per se, their backyard, let's say. Nobody would have to be concerned about any dangerous dogs that are sleeping in the backyard, etc. Is that correct? Because our earlier discussion, Chief, was about having side yard access. So each yard would have two gates, one on either side. Could you speak to that? Because I don't see the side gates anywhere in this image, which is really what we're talking about.
Through the chair to member meeting. So my understanding was there was only supposed to be one set of gates for each access to the property. So that would be for emergency services only to be used, and maybe for their own property owners to use themselves, not for access between for other people living in that area.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. So just to finalize, what I've heard from this is that it doesn't appear that we're ready to approve this bylaw. I don't see there's any urgency right now because it's mainly dealing with townhouses that are with planning. And I think that based on what this diagram shows us and what the chief said, it is not for residents to access their neighbors' backyards as a path or a cut through to to mow lawns, etc. So that would be my recommendation, for us to have this come back to us, because it is an important discussion. And I want to make sure that it's meant to serve the purpose for which it's intended.
Okay. Can you unshare so I can see the committee, please? Sorry. Thank you. Member Taylor.
Yeah, just follow up with Member Minnings through the chair to Andrea or Katie. So are all our new townhouse developments going to have that easement to get into the backyard? Because based on that, then there should be no issues with Member Brennan and Member McIntyre. We've got the easement through there, and you're not disturbing your neighbors, and it should be good. So if you can, I'm just confused. I thought we're talking about each property having to put two gates on each parallel fence. I'll wait for the answer on that one.
Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Taylor. So what has arisen is, in some cases, there is a person door within the garage to access the backyard. And I can certainly show an example if necessary, but what that would allow is you to bring your lawnmower through your garage, through a person door to the rear yard. So in those particular situations, an easement would not be required for access only. What I think Chief Cranny is saying is that even with a door in the garage, if someone has their car in the way and the fire department and the paramedics can't get through that way, we need a secondary emergency access, where easements for getting your lawnmower through the backyard may not be possible or contemplated. So it's basically just making sure there's always some type of easement in the back. Well, not a formal easement, sorry, just some kind of access in the back for fire and emergency services, whether it be through an access easement or whether it be just through a gate.
Okay. Oh, supplemental?
Yeah, it's supplemental. So then why wouldn't we, with new developments, demand an easement the way that one that was put up there? That's the answer. That would solve everything, I think. That's just my point.
I think Ms. Woodrow answered that, but I can't be sure. I think you did talk about that.
No, but if she,
for that, yeah.
But she's saying if you can get through it through the garage.
No, I meant, I'm sorry, Member Taylor. She said earlier when someone asked her about easement thing that some do and some don't.
But the ball's in our court. Why don't we do it?
Okay, Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So certainly it can be a matter of building design or access easement that allows folks to get to their rear yards. So in some cases where the building design allows you to access your rear yard from the garage, then also placing an easement would be an additional encumbrance.
Okay, Member McIntyre.
Through the chair, I just want to go back to the same question I had.
You're on mute, Member McIntyre.
Oh, I shouldn't be. Just a moment.
You're good.
Yeah, you're
good
back.
Back through the chair. Do we have any development in this township at the moment where we don't have the green space, the easement between Townhouse Block A and Townhouse Block B, where I'm agreeing with Member Taylor and Member Mennings, we can mitigate the fact that we need a side gate anywhere. If there's a green space in the back, we have one particular gate in the back. We'll access all emergency, including fire and ambulance and so on. I'm wondering why we even have this here if we don't have any of it happening in the township at the moment. I mean, we're making a bylaw for something that may one day happen or may not. From my view, I think that we have access from the green space, be separating a block here and a block there, and we need a rear gate, yes, to get the emergency staff and so on through, and it is an insistence to get the fellow in the middle to go around and put his lawnmower in the backyard and cut his grass. But we don't have anything. If we don't have anything that are back to back with no green space, the bylaw is not necessary at all today, period. If it's maybe planning can tell me if there are back to back with no green space in the middle, no, or perhaps someone in planning can help me with that question. Thank you.
Ms. Mandeville.
Thank you through the chair. To Member McIntyre's question, yes, we do have townhouses contemplated that will be back to back in new phases and new developments that are currently being proposed. So we're trying to be proactive here, and we're trying to establish this situation and this bylaw before these developments come through so that people will have that information. We don't want people to move into these townhouses that are starting to be constructed right now and not know the rules as soon as they move in. We don't want to put this bylaw off so that next year we talk about this bylaw when people already live in these houses and people may have already put fences up. We want this to be something that's in place when we look at these developments and when we're approving these developments and when we're commenting on these developments. So to answer your question, yes, we do have townhouses proposed that will be back to back. Certainly staff are trying to do easements where necessary. However, the diagram we showed even shows that we want those gates even if there is an easement, because someone may not want a gate there. Someone might not want to take advantage of that easement. They might have a shed in their backyard that contains their lawnmower, their whippersnapper, whatever they need for the backyard, and they don't want to take advantage of that easement. But we as the township, for emergency services only, which is what the bylaw states, want a side or rear gate. And that again is what the bylaw states. So it will not be for neighbor interaction. It will just be for emergency services. And again, if there's a lock on that, our fire chief has said it's a lot easier for them from the fire department and the paramedics point of view to cut that lock, to break that lock, than to tear down a fence to try and gain access to that backyard. And we're not just talking about firefighting and firefighting equipment. We're also talking about stretchers and all kinds of emergency access. So essentially, that's where this whole discussion has come from. It's an emergency access perspective. And even with those easements in place, as we showed on the diagram, we still need those gates to be in there because someone may choose not to have a gate. They may choose not to take advantage of that easement.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mandeville. Okay. Yes, Member McIntyre.
Supplemental. It seems to me that the idea of a gate. Do we have? I don't know how many multiple, or if we have any, other than what perhaps Ms. Mandeville said about we do have back to back somewhere. First of all, can we not now mandate that we have a little easement in there for people to get in and out, and just have a rear gate? This infringing on side gates for people coming through my yard, I'd be very unhappy with that. If I had a rear gate, welcome to anybody who needs to get in, ambulance, fire, paramedics, anybody who has a need for a wheelchair or a stretcher. But I mean, side gates in this case, perhaps you have one development like that. Is it possible to mandate from here on forward that there is a green space between the Block A and Block B in order for the emergency services to get in? I've never, ever seen back-to-back townhouses in over 40 years. And one example is that in Brampton, where my son lives, he has no gate in the back, and he has to lift his lawnmower over the fence. He's now in the process of doing something about that. It's a freehold townhouse, not a condominium. However, the side gates here would, in this particular case, if you have one development like that, we might make the bylaw for that development. However, if we're going to go on with townhouses, we got to stop them from going back to back with no green space. That's just my view on it. I'm prepared to go forward with this if we have one, but I think it's ludicrous to have side gates in this case.
Miss Mandeville.
I just wanted to, if I could, just kind of clarify the side gate. The image we showed, which I was just trying to bring back up here, it's a side gate, but it's in the what you might call the rear yard. Here it is. Yeah. So essentially, you can see on this image here that we were looking at before, again, the brown is the potential fence. The blue is the potential gate. This one right here is a side yard. So we're not necessarily talking about side yard gates here. This would be a side yard gate. So it's at the back of the property, but it's on the side or their interior lot line. So we're not necessarily talking about gates up here. Certainly someone could do that if they wanted to, but we're talking about this being a side yard gate, or on this side, that being a side yard gate. It's not necessarily something that's up close to the house. And again, it is for emergency services only. It's not for, you know, neighbors being able to trespass. So I just wanted to clarify that when we talk about side yards. And again, this is with an easement. So that is with that piece of green space. We still want those gates there off of the easement.
Thank you, Ms. Mandeville. Okay, Member Brennan.
Yes, just a couple of questions from the chair to Katie. These easements then, these would be, the property would be owned by the landowner, the person who bought the townhouse, not by, it's not a public easement, right? Is this correct? This is an easement that basically the land, they pay taxes on the land where the easement lies. Is this correct?
Through the chair to Member Brennan, typically that's how the easement works. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And are there any provisions if, yeah, the side gate that you showed in the picture makes perfectly good sense to me. I get that, but I share Councillor McIntyre's concern on other scenarios like the rest of that thing where the side gates go through. For instance, if someone was to come through and damage the property with some of these small rental backhoes, things like that, and God knows there's always a neighbor out there just willing to do that kind of crap. You know, do you get compensated for the damage to whatever you've done, your landscaping and so forth? And you would need gate specifications, I would think, for fire to get through. I could build a gate that's 2 feet wide, or I could build one that's, you know, wheelchair accessible. And then thirdly, what's to stop me from building, let's say a 4x8 hut 4 inches from the gate, so that the gate is rendered virtually useless anyway? So, like, how would you deal with that? Because most people want a little hut for, you know, shears and lawnmowers and so forth. What's to stop you from putting that in a position where it blocks any reasonable emergency access?
Well, who would like to answer that? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I'm going to circle back a bit because I think part of this conversation has begun to be about more the neighbors, and that is not what the proposed bylaw is. The proposed bylaw is to require gates purely for emergency access. We are not talking about requiring gates for neighbor access. If people want to fence their whole backyard for their neighbors, that's fine. But we are purely talking about access for emergency purposes. If there's an easement in place that does facilitate neighbors going behind each other, but that is as far as this bylaw is concerned, that is a separate discussion for planning to deal with within the terms of what's in an easement. And those are laid out in the definition and terms within the registered easement. The bylaw that is under discussion today is completely just to facilitate emergency access along the back side of townhouse properties. So I just wanted to recenter the discussion a bit. I think some of this is, I'm just afraid that we've gone down the path of worrying about neighborhood access when that is not what the bylaw proposal is in the slightest. It may be permitted under a easement, which is a separate discussion with the planning department. This is purely a bylaw amendment under the fence bylaw with respect to emergency access only through rear yard gates or backyard gates. So I did just want to circle that back because I think we're starting to confuse issues here. So with that, I'll just.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Member Minnings, and then I think we should.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would agree that what the clerk just said is true, that the conversation did go sideways, but I would like to say that that was based on the responses that I received and some of my fellow councillors received around the confusion of what's being presented. And since there is no immediate concern to life or safety at this point, regarding rear access in townhouse developments, I would suggest that this go back to staff to tighten and clarify the wording and bring it back to this desk. And I would like to call the vote on that.
So okay, just for clarification, Member Minnings, you're asking that the matter be referred back?
So she's asking for an amendment. I guess we have to vote on the amendment. Is that
well, I'm not sure what the amendment would be.
No, I'm not either.
Why I'm asking for clarification.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm not asking for amendment at this point. I'm asking that it go back to staff to clarify the proposed bylaw that you're putting in place, noting that there is no immediate safety or fire concern to any existing townhouse developments. And as per Ms. Mandeville, I don't know of any back-to-back townhouse units that will be inhabited within the next year, as was suggested. So I don't see a concern from a fire perspective or safety perspective to send this back to be revised and brought back to this table because it is an important discussion. Thank you.
Member Burkett.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and no disrespect to Member Minnings. I see no point to have to bring it back. It's very clear as to what staff's trying to do. What they're trying to do is protect the township because we now have applications in the queue where developers are looking to build townhouses, and staff need this bylaw to protect the township as well as our residents when these townhouses go up. If they're not part of the site plan agreement, they're not going to have a mechanism to place them. Like, this is needed so they can move forward with the applications. I think that's what we're looking at, are we not? I can have Madam CAO speak to it.
Yes, please, Madam CAO.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify for timing, there are building permits out on townhouses right now, and they're scheduled tentatively for June closing. So it's not a year from now. And as Ms. Mandeville had said before, we're trying to get ahead of it to protect the municipality. That's the whole purpose.
And I just have one comment is, and I'm sure that the chief would verify that we need to be proactive because we never know what could happen. And this puts us at a place where we're ensuring the safety.
So if I can, I just want to, Madam Chair, Member Minnings did call the vote. So at this point, what I would suggest is that a motion come forward that the matter be referred back to staff. I will have to follow up with Member Minnings afterwards because I'm not sure what the language would change to. Staff were pretty tight in what they're proposing. So I can follow up with Member Minnings afterwards. But the motion right now, just let me.
Okay, thank you.
And if it fails, then we go back to the original motion. So
thank you.
Just let me pull one together for us.
Okay.
Okay, so the current motion then, as Member Minnings has called the vote, is that administration report number 823-044 dated November 22nd, 2023 regarding housekeeping amendment fence bylaw be received, and that the proposed amendment be referred back to staff for clarification.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member Taylor, second by Member Minnings. All in favor?
I can't see. So 1, 2, 3. Member McIntyre, what's your vote? Member Brennan, what's your vote? So that motion fails.
Okay, let's go back to the original motion then, Madam Clerk.
Second, I just need to.
Sorry, I've lost my.
That's okay.
Agenda.
Okay. So the original motion is that administration report number 823-044 dated November 22nd, 2023 regarding housekeeping amendment fence bylaw be received, and further that the proposed amendment be approved, and further that the required bylaw be brought forward to the next council meeting.
Member Taylor.
I asked for a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you. So I can move in a seconder, please. Moved by Member Burkett, seconded by Member Jansen. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Recorded vote requested by Member Taylor. Member Taylor, for or against?
No.
Okay. Member Burkett, for or against? Sorry, I can't. Was that a for or against? Sorry. Thank you.
Yes.
Member McIntyre, for or against?
No.
Okay. Member Brennan, for or against?
Yes.
That's a yes. Okay, Member Minnings, for or against?
I can't. We either have a sign. We can't hear you. Sorry. Against?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm working between two screens. Sorry.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Thank you. That would be very appreciated.
Okay.
Member Brennan, I covered you. Member Jansen, for or against?
He's a yes.
Okay, and Member Cox, for or against?
Yes.
Okay, motion's carried 4-3.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much, Chief, for coming in to the meeting. Okay, we'll move on to G4, planning report. Floating accommodations. And who, sorry, I got to get this up. Kate, Miss Mandeville, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe our consultant, Jamie Robinson, may actually like to speak to it instead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Good morning, Mr. Robinson. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. So this staff report was brought about to, there's a couple of reasons. So the purpose of the report is to request that council provide some direction to staff to further advance this matter and schedule a public meeting, which would seek to amend the zoning bylaw to place some limitations in the township with respect to these floating dwellings. The problem really has arisen out of, it was really born out of a property in Georgian Bay next to Christie's Mill, where this person started manufacturing these floating homes, and then the issue precipitated as these floating homes found their way onto Little Lake and near the Narrows, and were placed there over the last couple of summers in a couple of different locations. And the province has recently addressed this issue from a provincial perspective by making amendments to some legislation to specifically identify that these structures are not considered to be dwellings and that they're not permitted on Crown lands, which is what was occurring. They were typically being located within Crown lands. The unique situation Severn Township finds itself in is the entire northern part of the township is surrounded by the Trent Severn, which is not provincial jurisdiction under the water. It's federally owned by Trent Severn. So that provincial legislation that was passed does not apply to water associated with Sparrow Lake, with the Severn River, and Gloucester Pool and Little Lake. So therein lies one of the concerns. You'll note on the agenda there is a move afoot at the federal level to address this issue. There's another agenda item that speaks to this. What this proposed bylaw would do is a couple of things. It would restrict the ability of floating homes to exist in the township or to be used on water bodies within the township. And it would also restrict the ability to construct these things within the township by prohibiting them and prohibiting like activities within the township. So the idea being is that if you can't construct them and you can't occupy them within the township, they're just simply not permitted anyway. There's been some questions with respect historically to jurisdiction of the municipality to zone lands that are underwater or over top of water. There has been recent case law. It's called a glass bell case that comes from Halliburton, where the MNR was involved and the local municipality was involved, and both were indicating that they didn't feel they had jurisdiction to regulate structures over water. In that case, it was a boathouse. But that decision did indicate that municipalities do have the ability to zone lands that underwater and to zone structures that attach to shorelines, such as docks and boathouses and the like. So we believe that the municipality does have the ability to regulate these structures, and that's the purpose of the bylaw. So that provides a bit of a Coles Notes on what's being proposed here. There is a bylaw, a draft bylaw that we've prepared that's attached to this staff report. That draft bylaw proposes some amendments to some of the definitions within the current bylaw to tighten a few things up, and it proposes some general provisions to specifically deal with this issue head on. So that's sort of the Coles Notes. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to try to answer them. But in sort of a big picture perspective, this bylaw is a response to sort of a new phenomenon that hasn't historically existed and didn't exist when zoning bylaws were sort of contemplated previously. So it's a response to that change. So any questions, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to do my best to answer those. Oh, you're muted, Ms. Combs.
Member Taylor, then Member Brennan, then Member Jansen.
Thank you. So through the chair to Jamie. So Georgian Bay have attempted to zone the lands under the water. What was your comment about that?
So through you, Madam Chair, to
Yes.
Councillor Taylor, there's a number of municipalities that have zoned lands underwater. So whether they're a water lot that's owned by a resident or whether it's Crown land, Tay Township does it. They place it, I believe, a lakeside zone is what they use. So does Georgian Bay Township. So those are just zones that basically don't permit anything but a boathouse or a dock within lands that are underwater. It's effectively what those municipalities have done historically.
So why wouldn't you have gone that route rather than this route?
You could go that route. What this does is this just belt and suspenders things, I would say, makes it very explicit that these structures are prohibited. So typically zoning is a permitted use. It's a tool that identifies what uses are permitted as opposed to what's prohibited, unless you want to be very, very explicit in establishing a prohibited use. And we just felt in this instance, because of the nature of the use and what's occurred historically, that the best approach in this instance would be to define what these things are and specifically prohibit them throughout the municipality.
Thank you. And then I have two other comments. What about the fact that the federal government definition of a vessel how does that work if they're the proponents for these things are calling them a vessel and not a floating accommodation?
So through you, Madam Chair. So the province dealt with, I'm going to answer your question I sort of in a roundabout way by talking first about what the province has done with respect to that. So the province through their legislation has changed the definition of how that vessel and how this term functions. What we understand to be the case is that the feds are looking at modifying their definition of what a vessel is. We, however, have a zoning bylaw, and the zoning bylaw for the municipality operates independent of any of those other pieces of legislation. It doesn't rely on those other pieces of legislation for a definition. So we can define a vessel however we see fit within the municipality's zoning bylaw, and we can create other terms that we define. So the approach here was to make modifications to your definitions related to watercraft, but then also establish a new definition that specifically identifies what's occurring here. And in a planning context, whatever definition fits the bill or closely aligns with the use that's being undertaken, that's the definition that is to be applied. So there isn't a situation where they could say, no, we're a vessel here, we're a watercraft, this doesn't apply to us, because they're more appropriately, more closely aligned with the specific definition we created for these structures in the case. That's how they would be considered in the context of the township zoning bylaw, and then simply not permitted. So if they were to exist in the township, we'd be charging them for not complying with the township zoning bylaw, which again, we believe we have the right to do.
Thank you. Then, but my third comment, I'm certainly would like to see public input on this, and there's three groups that should be definitely invited if we can make sure that they know about the upcoming meeting, and that's the Gloucester Pool Cottagers Association, which includes McLean Lake, and the second one is the Tea Lake Properties Association, and the third one is Shrapnel, and that's the Severn River Association of Property Owners. So that pretty well encompasses all my ward and part of Ward 5 as well. So if those three groups would be aware of when this meeting is, and their input would be invaluable. Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Mandeville.
Thank you, Chair Cox. I just quickly, before we forgot, wanted to ask Member Taylor if he could send the contact information of those groups, if he has it. That would be easy for us.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. I think it was Member Brennan next. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Jamie. Yeah, I got to say, anything that stops this kind of development is good. So I'm pleased with this type of progress. I do have 3 questions for you, though. How far out into the water, like from the high water mark, I guess it would be, would this legislation apply? Like, how far out would you go? That would be question number 1. Number 2, is there any liability that the Severn taxpayer takes on, or any grandfather required? We know they're building them in Severn Township. Because they're already doing that, do we assume any liability here by coming up with this thing?
Member Brennan, can we just do one at a time so we
absolutely
it's easier for him? Yeah.
Thank
okay.
You.
Let's go back to the first one again, okay?
Oh, yeah, the depth of the bylaw into the water.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for making things easy for me. I appreciate it. So first off, from the distance into the water, the zoning bylaw for the municipality applies to all lands within the corporate limits of the township. So it extends to the limits of the township into the water. So effectively where you meet Georgian Bay, or where you meet Muskoka Lakes, or where you meet Gravenhurst, as the case may be.
Thank you.
From a liability I'll answer the liability question. I'm not really equipped to answer the liability question. I think that would be more directed at potentially the clerk, but it would be a better question for the lawyers, which we could look into that and come back with an answer for you associated with that. But our position is that they're so anyway, I just have to circle back with you on that question. I don't really want answer a legal question
Yeah.
beyond my scope.
Thank you. Yeah, no, a good document. The last one, Councillor Taylor spoke about 3 people being involved. When the original provincial legislation was proposed, the biggest group that made them change what they were writing was the boating industry. I guess the power squadrons and others. They were the ones that really pushed back. And then we had a certain big change in what was proposed by the provincial government. I would suggest that in addition to the suggestions made by Councillor Taylor, we would really need some input from that very powerful group with regard to any concerns they might have as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Ms. Mandeville, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair Cox. To Member Brennan's question there, or comment. The original proposal from the provincial government included a lot of provisions that would apply to vessels and overnight stays and long-term stays of vessels. Our bylaw is not contemplating anything that would apply to real vessels to that boating community. So certainly we would be advertising to all members of the public as best we could through, online sources, postings, that kind of thing. But I don't think this would get the same feedback as the province's original proposal, since nothing we're proposing here applies to those live aboard true vessel boats.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Jansen.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Through the chair. I guess my comments are, I know we've got the business owner that's creating these floating accommodations in Port Severn. And then I'm going to guess or assume that we've got people that have purchased them already and are operating them, and they're sitting out in the waters, and they are generating complaints due to them being an eyesore or being out of place on our waterways. I guess in terms of practicality, if we're going to pass this bylaw, I think public consultation is good. If we're going to go that route, if we pass this bylaw and make it illegal to own or build or operate these in our waters, what will be the expectation of the owners? Are they to take them out and we're just going to move the issue to another waterway that doesn't have any of these bylaws in place, or are they going to have to dismantle them? What would be the practical approach to, I guess, enforcing this bylaw? If it's, or are we just going to be fining people per month? The other part I have a concern with is I guess on the marina side, if somebody's got a floating accommodation that is sitting in a marina and the marina is making income off of the floating accommodation, is that something that we could look at as accommodating for any of the marina owners?
Member Jansen, I don't know. Jamie, is that for you, or did you want to go to the clerk, or? I think it's talking about enforcement.
Yeah, the enforcement part, I'm not, there's a number of ways in which that could play out, but if it's not a permitted use in the municipal, like from your municipal, I'll let the clerk elaborate, but from the Severn Township perspective, if it's not permitted in the township, it's simply not permitted. They would have to move outside of the township or they have to go somewhere else. If there's no other place to go, well, that use needs to cease to exist over time. So that's my comment on that. From a marina owner's perspective, I think what you're referring to, if I've got this clear, is that there may be some instances where people are living aboard boats in marina properties, or living aboard their vessel at a marina property, and is that something the township should allow for or should permit? I think that's a separate issue from this one at hand. So if that's something that is an issue or something the township wants to look at, they certainly can, but I think it's beyond the scope of this exercise that we're undertaking right now. That's something that's separate. Certainly there are areas in the province where folks do live on their boats year round in marinas. There's also instances in Fenland Falls, or in Bob Cajun, for example, is one I can think of, where there's a marina that they've basically created houses floating houses inside the marina, where that's within the Severn where folks do live. So there are different examples of different approaches in other jurisdictions, but yeah, if that's something you want to look at, then, and that's the will of council, then we could, but that's not what's before us today.
I was just wondering, did you want to speak to that, Madam Clerk? The enforcement part?
I can speak to in general. Zoning enforcement is not a quick process, so we send a letter out saying the current use is not permitted per the zoning. If you get compliance, great, and they move it, great. If you don't, then we end up in court. So I just want to put that out there, that enforcement of something like this through zoning is not a quick process if they choose to not move. And we would end up in court on it. So this isn't something where there'd be a set fine. It'd be zoning enforcement through the Planning Act.
Thank you. Member Burkett.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So this, just to give a bit of history, this was flagged by the mayor of Georgian Bay, who phoned me to tell me the gentleman that was building these sea cans was planning to move into Severn. So when I heard this, I phoned Madam CAO and asked that we need to be proactive. I knew that we had nothing now, and I know of no sea cans in our township yet, but no different than the previous item that we had a long discussion about. We sitting here need to protect our residents. We need to have something. We need to have a bylaw in place, whether it's going to work or not. We need to have something so that when someone buys one of these, we would hope that they would look to see if there's anything in place that may stop them, because they will become a problem. So that's why it is here today. And I want to compliment both Jamie and our staff for taking the time to print this. And I'm looking forward to the public meeting to hear what our residents have to say. I've already heard from one gentleman who's on Gloucester Pool that applauds what our staff has done. So he thanked me immensely for having something in place. But again, I think we need to be proactive. So thank you, Jamie, for all your work, and our staff for doing what we've done here with this document.
Okay, Madam CAO.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up something Councillor Jansen said. He was concerned for the builder of the vessels. While they're in Port Severn, they're not in the township of Severn. Just to be clear, they're on the other side of the border, and Georgian Bay is figuring out whether they can legally build those where they are or not. But so far, it's not a township of Severn building issue.
Member Jansen, did you have something else there before? Sorry.
I guess my supplementary question was just about the marinas and whether or not we have canvassed them to see if they would be willing to accommodate any of these floating accommodations. I would imagine that they would generate some income for the marina owners, and it would take the eyesore off the water and into a marina space where it might be more appropriate. That was my only comment.
Okay, Ms. Mandeville.
Through the chair to Member Jansen's comment, I have spoken to a couple marine owners in the Port Severn area who they're not hurting for business. Boat slips generally in this area are in high demand, and they're not accommodating these floating accommodations. They're just not worth it for them from a business perspective. The ones I have spoken to, surely I haven't spoken to them all, but the ones very close in Port Severn, they're not interested in these, and they would support us trying to eliminate them.
Thank you, Ms. Mandeville.
Ms.
Any
Chair,
other
if I may
questions?
just say one thing. I should have mentioned this at the start. It's not just the eyesore component of these, which has raised alarms for the township and for the cottage associations. There's a number of factors. Many of them, whether it's taxation related, whether it's fairness, whether it's environmental concerns with how waste and gray water is dealt with, whether it's locating these within environmental protected areas that otherwise are not permitted buildings and structures. So there's kind of a whole host of fairness and environmental issues that come into play as part of this. And I should have mentioned that at the outset as one of the reasons why this bylaw is being considered.
Yes, I agree. That was one of my major concerns, more so than anything, was the environmental. Okay, Madam CAO.
Yeah, I was just going to follow Jamie's comment up. It's also life safety, right? There are no building permits, there are no fire inspections. That's that kind of thing. So that's really important to look at as well. Exactly. Thank you. And thank you again for bringing this forward and for us being proactive, as as Member Burkett said. So we're ready, and we do have our ducks in a row. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay, motion reads that the planning report number P23-040 dated November 15th, 2023, with respect to updating the township zoning bylaw 2016-65 as amended be received, and further that a public meeting on the proposed amendments to the township zoning bylaw for floating accommodations be undertaken, and that a jock bylaw be brought forward to council's consideration, taking into account public comments.
May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Member Taylor, second by Member Brennan. All in favor?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you.
And I don't know, Madam Chair, if you want to take a 5-minute quick.
Yes, please. Could we just have a quick bio break? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
we're ready.
Go.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, let's go to G5, Public Works Report, Petition for Drainage Work. And Mr. Burke.
Did it start? There I am.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. So the report just summarizes that we did receive an application. Of course, we had a delegation in the early part of this meeting, and staff generally, feel that we should explore the petition. But on that same breath, it's not necessarily mean that it would move forward. It just will kick off the first step, and the first step is really to provide notification to the Ministry of it's OMAFRA, so Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, as well as the neighboring municipalities. So that'll be the first step, and that's I'm here for any questions.
Hey, anyone have any questions, comments? Member Burkett.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair to Derek. So Derek, how does it work when it is a county road and we would have to use their ditch? Do we work jointly with the county, or is it something that just we do in at Severn?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, the Drainage Act's fairly old legislation, and so how it works is the lower tier municipality is the responsible party for undertaking the Drainage Act petition and stuff like that. But the lands that would be assessed really doesn't matter. So the county of Simcoe, for instance, would be responsible for assessment against the county roadway, Canadian Pacific or any CN, any railway corridors would be responsible for their portion as well. And of course, every landowner we work with in conjunction with, so that would be private landowners or public or, any landowner that's impacted is kind of dealt with the same style of approach, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
Member Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair to Derek, I think there is a water issue there for sure, and I would agree with the motion as written that we should go a step further on this.
Anyone else want to speak to this? I think that water issue has been there for years, and now that they want development, then they're going to look after it, and that's the way it should be. That they should be financially responsible, and it's up to them, not the township, to have any worries about paying for it or doing anything. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Okay, the motion reads that Public Works Report number W23-046 dated November 15th, 2023 with respect to petition for drainage works be received. Further, that the petition for drainage works on the southwest quadrant of Anderson Line and Upper Big Ship Road be accepted. And further, that staff be directed to provide notice of the petition to prescribed persons in accordance with the Drainage Act Section 5(1)(b).
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member McIntyre, second by Member Jansen. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So now we will go back to E2.
2.1.
2.1. Yes. Sorry. Member Brennan.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand the scenario that's going on here. My understanding of this is that, if I'm correct, originally the old mall owners, not Canadian Tire, used to at least provide some form of subsidy for these 20,000 people that are moved up into our area, and that Canadian Tire decided not to help out again. And I'm just trying to I'd like to understand our official position on this. It's normal for a township to pay for transit in its own area. I understand this is kind of a weird one. So I would just like to understand what's really going on here at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I think I need some history on this. Is there a staff member who would like to talk about this? Or maybe Member Burkett?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. Do you want to speak to it, Member Taylor? Or?
Yeah, well, I can jump in first. And
go ahead.
Before there were three parties, through the chair, three parties that helped pay for the transit. There was the mall, City of Orillia, Township of Severn. And then as it progressed along, the mall wanted out of it. So then there was down to two. There was us and Orillia. And then it came a couple of years ago, we decided not to put any money into it because we actually did a study prior to that, and Council of the Day decided that that's a standalone issue with the city of Orillia, and that's the way I stand as today, that we shouldn't be subsidizing it at all, in my opinion.
Thank you. That's very good. That's Member Briquette.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So we originally did not pay for it. What happened, if you remember back, and it was, I can't remember which year, we actually, the CEO of the day, hired someone who we know, related to someone, to stand there to see who was actually getting off the bus and who was using it. And what we found was that it was all Orillia residents. It wasn't, they were coming to work. That's what they were doing. It wasn't residents from Severn actually using the service to go to Orillia. They were coming from Orillia to frequent the mall. So the Council of the Day, I think we paid for, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years. We did help, but was it 2 years? We did contribute for 2 years. And again, we struggled with that because it wasn't ours to contribute to. The city of Orillia, and they won't tell you this, it's their third busiest route. So they are making money from it, and they're providing a service for their residents to come to work. That was the gist of it. And then hence you see the report here today. And to Member Taylor's comments, I don't feel it's our responsibility to subsidize something that Orillia is making money from. If it was a route that was providing service for our residents to get to Orillia, it would be a different story. So just to give you a little history and background.
Okay, Member Brennan, do you have a supplemental, or are you okay?
No, well, maybe, I guess we don't know if Orillia is making money, which is news to me. That's good to know. Then if it's unlikely they would discontinue the service, but if they did, I guess we don't. Based on what you're saying, is the impact on Severn would not be significant. It would be on the businesses, but they're the ones that have chosen not to contribute. So I'm not so sure I worry too much about that.
Member Brennan, I think the significance would be, and it was noted at that time, I just remembered that, is that the residents of Orillia were very upset.
Okay.
If that was going to be taken away.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay. Member Minnings.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first is, what's roughly the cost? I didn't see that in the ask put forward from the city.
Does anyone remember? I thought it was 15. Okay, Member Briquette.
Thank you, through the chair. It was 15,000 that they asked for before. And I just do remember Brennan's comments. They probably don't make money. I don't know of any transit that makes any money, but it's the third busiest route that Orillia has within the city. Sorry, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Minnings.
Sorry. My question was, what is the cost? Because I didn't see that in the request from the city of Orillia.
Member Briquette said it was we did pay 15,000, and that was a few years ago. Now, Madam CAO.
Yeah, I wonder. I also looked for it in the letter, and it's not there. And I wondered if that was deliberate from the city of Orillia, that they were looking for a contribution, but they didn't specify, because yeah.
Fair enough. My subsequent question is, I guess, for council. With the work that's planned, I believe, or at least it's going to be discussed at budget for Brody Drive, and then further up along Carleon Road, where there's I think it's a trailer park, a homes community there. Is there anything going forward in the future, just related to transit, where citizens who live out in the trailer home community and along Brody Drive might benefit from that in the future? And again, not specific to the ask on the table now from the city, but I'm just curious as to the benefit of still having some kind of a relationship with that transit into Severn.
First of all, the bus stops at the mall. And so if we wanted it, we would have to pay. And I don't know that they do it for it to come out to our residents along Carleon. But also I'll let Member Briquette.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. The report states that this is the only bus that the city of Orillia allows to leave its own border. So it's very unique. So for him to move even further, I doubt they would even entertain the thought. The fact that they're looking for some funds to subsidize coming to the hall, I struggle with, but as they said, as it says in the report, this is the only bus that leaves their borders.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I would just like to say, this is their bus. They're bringing their people here. And I believe that that is part of their transit system. They get subsidies from the government to help with their transit system. We all know that. And when they're buying new buses, there's subsidies from the provincial government. So in my idea, I would not want to contribute. Madam Clerk.
So based on the conversation, it would be that the correspondence from the City of Orillia regarding the request for funding contribution towards Orillia Transit be received and that the request for funding be denied.
Thank you very much. Mover and a seconder? Moved by Member Brennan, second by Member Burkett. All in favor?
5 yes.
McIntyre, are you frozen?
He's a yes.
Okay, sorry. I thought he was there, but he's only a picture. Sorry. Okay, we'll go on to just a second till I fix this.
It's E2.2, Madam Chair.
Yep, E.22. Yep, thank you very much. Ministry of Transport. Questions or comments? I froze. Member Taylor.
Yeah, I asked this to be pulled. Basically, the Minister of Transport is requesting comments on the VORR, that's the Vehicle Operation Restriction Regulations, and I'm wondering whether I'll look to planning and or the clerk, whether we send them our comments or what we're going to do with our previous issue with the planning document with floating accommodations, and maybe that would be a good thing that they see what we're planning to do. But I thought I'd see what the committee and or staff would suggest we let the Minister of Transport know what we're doing.
Miss Mandeville or Miss I don't know which one. I know that they're asking.
I guess I'll start, and if Ms. Mandeville needs to change again. I think staff's proposal was that we take the comments that council had previously approved to submit to the province, and take what applies here and submit them over to Transport Canada.
Ms. Mandeville, do you have anything to add?
To the chair's comment, generally speaking, I think some of the comments we made on the previous Ontario regulation would apply here. And I think we have a general pretty good understanding of council's views on this, especially given our last discussion earlier this meeting. So I think before the December 11th cutoff, staff could put together a letter with some comments on this.
Thank you very much. Member Brennan, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to the CAO, we've been asked and we've agreed to support another township's delegation on this matter at the upcoming Roma in January. Do you see any? I haven't seen the actual content of that yet. I'm sure they're working on it, but do you have any concerns with regard to wording relative to what we're saying today, or do you think we're just fine?
Through the chair, I think we'll be very consistent. I think we have the same position as Georgian Bay and consistent with our concerns with the provincial government and the federal government. So I don't see them
Right. Thank you.
Unaligned.
I have a quick question. Is this where do we let them know about our bylaw, or does that have anything to do with it? Go ahead, ma'am, CEO.
It's probably not related. I mean, we're looking for
right.
I think Jamie used the belts and suspenders, so we would prefer that they regulate it. That makes
right.
more sense. But while they're not, we're going to take the extra step.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Motion reads that the correspondence from the Ministry of Transport update to vessel operation restriction regulation consultation be received, And that staff submit comments based on the prior submission to the province and recent council discussions.
May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by member Jansen, second by member Taylor. All in favor? Member McIntyre? Are you a yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to H, new business.
I believe we just did that, Madam Chair.
Oh, I know that. I forgot. Was there anything newer? Okay, then we will go to adjournment. And I would just like to thank the committee. I have finished my term as chair and I pass my gavel to member McIntyre. And I want to thank everyone and thank the staff.
You.
So motion to adjourn, that this meeting's now adjourned at 11:02 a.m.
You have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by member Burkett, second by member Jansen. All in favor? Carrie, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Council going to the Live Home tour. We're starting at Minoki Beach on lot 15. So they're waiting for us. I just have